Welcome back to week 2 of our series, When God Calls, where we're trying to answer this question: how can I know when God is calling me to something? Another way to phrase that is, how do I know what God wants me to do? Or how do I know what my purpose is? These are deep and important questions, and so we're going to try to answer them together. Last week we talked about how one of the ways that we can be sure if God is calling us to something is to ask whether we're passionate about that thing. Does what I sense God calling me to align with what I'm passionate about? Do I care about that thing? We looked at how God called Moses to go to Egypt and lead the Israelites out of slavery, and how that calling was something Moses was passionate about. He had always had a passion for ending the suffering of his people, and when he held that passion up next to God's plan, Moses found his ultimate purpose. You know, it kind of reminds me of one of my favorite Pixar movies, Ratatouille. If you've never seen this movie before, it's about a rat. But don't get ahead of yourself, okay? It's cute, I promise. It's about a rat who lives in Paris and loves to cook. And as someone who has always loved food and loves to cook now as an adult, I really can't express to you how much I love this movie. So here, just check out this clip.
Tonight, before the dessert course, we present for your pleasure the traditional cheese trolley. To start, we have an excellent clochette, creamy, very nice, very light. Next, a brebis, hearty, with a surprising bite. I think you'll find. And finally, the pièce de résistance, very special, very rare. It's so hot!
This is me. I think it's apparent that I need to rethink my life a little bit. I can't help myself. I like good food, okay? And good food is hard for a rat to find.
It wouldn't be so hard to find if you weren't so picky.
I don't want to eat garbage, Dad. What is that?
I don't really know.
You don't know, and you're eating it.
You know, if you can sort of muscle your way past the gag reflex, all kinds of food possibilities open up.
This is what I'm talking about.
Remy, the rat, has such a deep, almost spiritual passion for food. He talks about different foods almost like they're different people with different personalities and quirks and specific things that they each bring to a dish. And when you hear him go on and on, it's undeniable that Remy has a passion for food. And he obsesses over his idol, Gusteau, a world-famous chef who is now dead, but appears to him as a ghost, giving him wisdom and knowledge about the art of cooking. And one of the things that I really love about this movie is that, similar to what we talked about last week, Remy clearly has passion, but he hasn't quite found his purpose. Maybe like Remy, you too can identify things that you care about or enjoy doing. Maybe you have things that you know a bunch of random information about and can talk someone's ear off for hours and hours. But maybe you also assume that even though you're passionate about this thing, it couldn't possibly be what God is calling you to. You may say, sure, I'm passionate about this, but this can't really be, my calling. I'm a rat. Just kidding. You're not a rat. But like Remy, the rat, you may feel that somehow, in some way, you can't possibly do that thing. You may tell yourself it's impossible, that you aren't qualified, or you aren't capable, or there has to be someone else out there better for it. That despite the passion you feel, you may also experience this little thing called doubt. Now, let me say, this is a completely natural response that we may have when God calls. When God shows up in your life and puts something on your heart to do something, you may feel the initial excitement of your passion being engaged, like, yes, God, that would be so awesome if I could do that. But then oftentimes, we have this secondary response where we begin to doubt ourselves and whether we could actually do it, doubt God and whether he knows what he's doing, or we doubt whether we actually heard God call us at all. We can have all the passion in the world. I mean, look at Moses. He had so much passion. He burned with so much passion that he killed a guy. But even with all that passion burning inside of him, doubt can be like a fire extinguisher that puts out that fire of passion right away, leaving us unsure of God's calling in our lives. And so I feel compelled to offer you multiple ways, in addition to passion, of affirming God's calling in your life. I feel a burden to give you more than one way to test what you feel God may be calling you to, because if not, that doubt may become a barrier between you and the purpose God has for your life. If you have a Bible or you have the Bible app, meet me in the book of Exodus chapter 3. When we last left off, Moses had just been called by God to go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go free. And this was something he was passionate about. So of course, he's going to go run out and get right after it, right? Not quite. See, right after God reveals his calling to Moses, this is what Moses says. He says, verse 11, but Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God says, "I'll be with you." But then Moses asks, what if they, the Israelites, do not believe me or listen to me and say, "Lord, did the Lord did not appear to you?" And later he says, I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. Basically, I'm not a good public speaker. Do y'all recognize what Moses is feeling? That's doubt. He's hearing God's plan. He's passionate about his calling, but he's allowing doubt to stand in the way of him fulfilling his purpose. He doubts his own ability, and more importantly, he doubts that God will be with him when he says that he will be with him. And so because of Moses' doubt, God throws him a lifeline and saying, what about your brother, Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. And God sends Aaron to join Moses. It can be really challenging for you and I to be sure that what we think we're hearing God tell us to do is actually what God is telling us to do. Even if we have a miraculous encounter like Moses, where God speaks to us through a flaming bush, as humans, we can still fall into this pattern of thinking we're somehow not good enough, or smart enough, or eloquent enough, as Moses put it, to live out our calling. And there's a term for this. It's called imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is basically where even though you may be totally equipped and capable of doing something, you are overcome with self-doubt. And this idea that somehow you're a fraud. That somehow you've tricked everyone in the room into thinking that you could do something, but at any moment they're all going to find out that you actually can't. Now, it's untrue, but it can feel true to us in that moment, enough to hinder us from following God's calling. But one way that we can combat this doubt, this imposter syndrome-like feeling, is to look to the people in our lives. Moses was throwing question after question to God, trying to determine whether this was really God's plan for him or whether he'd made a big mistake. And even though it was something he was passionate about, he still wasn't 100% sold. And what ultimately pushed Moses forward was people. First, it was his brother Aaron. Moses had doubts about God's calling because God was calling him to speak, and he had what many scholars believe to be a speech impediment. And so God sent Aaron to be his spokesperson. God said, Aaron will be your partner in this. He's going to be your spokesperson. He's going to represent you the same way that you represent me. And Aaron showing up and supporting Moses was a confirmation to him that, yes, okay, God, you're really calling me to do this. But it wasn't just his brother Aaron. When Moses went to his father-in-law Jethro, whom he worked for, to tell him that he had to quit because God was calling him to go back to Egypt, listen to what Jethro says. He says, It says, then Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said, let me return to my own people in Egypt to see if any of them are still alive. And this is what Jethro says. He says, go, and I wish you well. This was a wise and trusted person in Moses' life who was telling him to go and do the thing that God was calling him to do. He said, I wish you well. Translation, I support you. I believe this is right for you. Sometimes it's not just the quantity of people in your life that help you discern your calling, but the quality. A lot of folks surround themselves with people who only tell them what they want to hear. They don't need them to be wise or spiritually mature. They just need them to say yes. But more important than just having a bunch of people who will go along with whatever you're thinking about doing, you need people who are actively listening to God, who are faithfully walking with him and serving him with their lives. Moses had doubt about the calling he had that God had on his life, but his people didn't. The trusted, godly people in his life were like, this is all you, bro. You got this, and we got your back. Aaron said, I'll even go with you. In your life, there will be moments when just feeling passionate about something that God is calling you to, or it may not be enough to push you forward. Sometimes it will, but other times you're going to need to feel the support of your people. You'll need to know that you're not alone, that you're not the only one hearing God calling you to that thing. You'll need to know that the godly people who love you and who know you best also sense God calling you. Now, some of you may already know this, especially students and leaders up at the San Mateo campus, but I have a confession. I didn't always want to be a pastor. I didn't always believe that this was for me, that this was God's calling in my life. Even after I'd kind of heard God call me to it, I still had doubts. And I put it off for like 5 years, but I'll never forget sitting down with one of my mentors, this wise and trusted man who had helped me so much in my faith as a teenager when I was your age, and him telling me, or me telling him, I should say, that, this is what I think I'm hearing God calling me to do. This is what I've heard. And I'll never forget him sitting there looking at me and smiling, and he said, yeah, everybody already knows that. We've all known that for years. We were just waiting for you to get it. And as soon as I heard those words come out of his mouth from someone that I knew and loved and trusted that he heard from God, I felt confident to live into my calling. And that is often the thing that pushes us past that doubt to act on what God is calling us to. It's knowing that we're not hearing God's voice in isolation, but that God is speaking to other people about what he wants you and I to do. Moses got confirmation from his brother and his father-in-law, people he trusted and respected and loved, and it helped him move past his doubt and move into his calling. When you're facing doubt in yourself, doubt in what you think God's calling you to, ask this question, do the trusted people in my life support what I sense God calling me to? And if you don't know, ask them. Ask the people in your life that you trust. Ask the people whose faith you look up to. Ask the people that you know well and that know you well. Often, if God is calling you to do something, he'll make it not only clear to you, but to the people around you. So you've got to identify those people. And when you're feeling unsure about what you sense God telling you to do, ask them. So as you head to your life groups, a great question that I want you to ask your leader to share with you, and then you can share it too, is who are the trusted people in your life that you'd go to when you hear God saying something to you? We'll see you guys next week.